from missing.
Okay.
To what currently exists as the process, or alternatives as if we went like a different direction?
From what I understood, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, I couldn't find where the video now was. I lost it.
From what I understood, we were supposed to, I could be totally wrong, but our alternative, the first one should be like what we're recommending, and then the second one is something related, but not.
That's what I understood.
The same.
Like two ways to solve our problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we talk about solving our problem, because I see, to change from the status quo, which right now it's like how I described it. But number one, solve the problem. If we have to have two steps, what do you guys think about the first one being, increase or implement specific training, then make the suggestion that, and I think I put this in one of my questions, was do law enforcement and the local providers, do they collaborate on when it comes to inform a partnership when they're dealing with kids before they commit them?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I feel like that's probably the best solution. Like, to me, they need like a medical professional's perspective, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is because right now the way it works is they come to the house, they say, okay, we're going to commit you, then they go to the facility, the cops check the kids in, and then they leave. There is no conversation between the providers or the law enforcement, and especially if this happens at night, like with ours, it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I think that's all really valid. I don't mean to interject. I just I want to note that we don't want to make it too anecdotal or personal, because if this is a legislation that's going to try and be passed, anecdotal evidence specific to a certain case can kind of put you in the weeds, and lawmakers won't necessarily regard that in the highest esteem. They'll admit that yes, there are problems associated with that, and that is a tragic event, but we do kind of want to keep it to as much policy as possible, just because without that means or that measure, it's going to be problematic to actually have substantiated evidence to actually argue the case. I just want to throw that out.
Right, that's a great point. But I think as far as from a policy perspective, especially like with the state university, and if the facility that the minors are being committed to, could the state have put in policy and kind of mandate this collaborative effort? That's kind of what I'm talking. Especially when we're dealing with minors, and kind of tie in that aspect of it. Does that make sense? I don't know, because I agree. I don't want it to be anecdotal, but when you look at the policies that are in place, there's really, I've looked. There's really no, in the statute, it doesn't really talk about the differentiation between adolescents and adults.
Do you think that we could find somewhere? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree from that standpoint. That's a valid argument that there is no statute that dictates that, where we could use substantive or secondary evidence from other states. But to say this happened to individual X, even without a disclosure, that violates a lot of HIPAA regulations, that attacks the hospital, that brings in a lot of secondary means where it seems like it's vindictive or a personal project. And I know from a litigatory standpoint, that will be admissible in court. Like, that wouldn't hold. Like, policymakers aren't going to argue for that unless it's a unified charity event. And those are very rare and far between. I'm not saying they don't exist, and I'm not saying we need to squash this, but I'm just saying the broader we can make it to attack that, if this were to be an actual effective policy, in theory, then we could argue the weeds and the definition of that basically in secondary literature that would then be discussed within a house or within a state body, but not as the primary case. And it also makes it a lot harder if we're just doing anecdotal, because then we have to do a case series of information relating to anecdotal evidence over and over and over. Do you see what I'm saying?
So, yeah. So what do you suggest as we're going about it, like when we're looking for other things from other states? Is this something that you will look at before we turn in, just to make sure we don't like have something?
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that? Okay.
right. I mean, that's why I was saying, like, it'd be kind of awesome if we could, if some people have time, maybe jump on FaceTime or do something after, this, where we can just do a little supplemental work together. I would suggest, possibly, like, dealing a little more with the first responders and questions regarding, how first response is handled in different states and different policies.
Yeah.
And then kind of try and address that. The Baker Act's fine, and that's substantive, but, we can meld other state laws, other Supreme Court, jurisdictional stuff. I mean, it doesn't just have to be the district associated with Florida. There are other districts that have other, statutes that are relative to this. And again, since it's a working law, there are amendments that can be made to it. But I know that, like, just using individual anecdotal evidence is kind of tough, especially when you get into, unless it's very highly publicized in the media or there's a lot of pushback from even a federal level, like, it becomes harder and harder and harder to argue it over and over. So that's just my 2 cents on it. But,
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Well, thank you for that.
I agree.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense, and I think too, one of the reasons why in Florida this has garnered a lot of attention, because I think over the last 2 years there have been a lot of highly visible cases where the media was involved, and there were children younger than 13 that were part of this act. So I'm kind of curious about, like, some of the other states. Do other states make differentiations between minors and adults? That's kind of like, are there statutes where, is one size fits all across the other states, or that kind of thing? That's kind of what I've always been curious about that.
Well, I think that's a valid question, but again, I think it's kind of getting out of the scope, right? So she wants a very simple problem that we can address with a very simple solution or alternative. And when you broaden it, it makes it a little tougher. I mean, saying something like, just kind of based upon, her notes, like I wrote this up, like, why is adolescent response to primary first responders in their intake evaluation held as a meritable psychiatric evaluation? That's simple. Why is that held? And then that doesn't answer the problem. That doesn't basically get it. It's just a question. Or, what is the communication disconnect that occurs between primary responders and adolescents? Like, those are just very simple questions, very broad, and that allows us to kind of develop a little bit more on it, as opposed to just trying to figure out, what's interesting to adolescents and adults. If we kind of keep it within a realm of the scope, we can dive into that in papers and use that as a secondary source, but we do kind of have to keep it very limited, just because it is a simple question, and we want to be able to pose it as a simple question where we can add in stuff to it, but again, we want to address the simple issue. When you talk about both adolescents and adults as a whole, those are two very large patient populations, and that takes a lot of literature review. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. I don't know how everybody feels about that, but
no, I totally concur. I mean, I just think like she said, we were overthinking it, and everyone agrees it needs to be more streamlined. We pick one area. Like Cyrus is saying, my notes what basically she was saying was, what's the problem? Just what's the problem? And then she said, for example, not get an accurate assessment from law officials and go from there and just pick a target range group. I mean, I think what Scott is saying is if we find like Florida's protocol is lacking in one area, but say Texas does it better in their area, we can compare and contrast the two states. But again, it's got to be on one topic, one age range, so we all can be on the same page.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of what I was. When I'm talking about looking at other states, it's when we have to offer the solutions.
Right.
Kind of compare and contrast. Does this state do it differently? And what works and what's successful, and that's just with the communication aspect and the initial assessment aspect. That's all that I'm alluding to.
Oh, I have a
Does
question.
anyone?
Sorry. I just wanted to know, like, what triggers, like, what starts the whole process with law enforcement getting involved? Because, I mean, we were talking about that law enforcement should maybe communicate with a physician or some kind of psychiatric kind of connection for the questioning and the guidance. But what is the prompt or the trigger to even initiate this process to start with? Is that where the problem is? Is that we run forward and we assess this child, but what was the purpose for assessing the child and go in this direction?
Yeah,
I think that's an exact question that we could say. I mean, that in and of itself is an exact question. I mean, that would be honestly perfect.
Yes.
I mean, without trying to answer it, that's a simple question. What is the trigger aspect that leads first responders to do this? Or rather, why is that? I mean, like, hopefully somebody like jotted that down, because that's it. That's perfect.
Yeah, that is perfect, because that I think is the crux of the problem, is that law enforcement, are they being called by a teacher, by a neighbor, a friend, that kind of thing, and that is great. I think I'm trying to write that down. Did anybody else get it? Because I'm not doing so well.
No, I think what Rochelle means is, like, is it a statement? Like, is there a trigger statement that makes law? Like, for example, I want to harm myself. Like, boom, that's the trigger, and now first responders. Is that kind of what you meant, Rochelle?
Well, kind of like what just starts the whole process. Is it somebody who suspects the child is thinking it, the child has said something, the child has expressed they have a plan, or, how do we get the law enforcement involved? Like,
Gotcha.
how
Right.
do we get to this point to where law enforcement or a teacher or a caregiver, somebody is starting this process to get this child committed? How does that, that's part of the training. Like, what makes you think that this is the next step for this kid, or the right step for this kid?
Yeah, I think you just nailed the problem right there. Is there's no codified way. If a parent hears their child talking to another kid about hurting themselves, then all the parent has to do is call 911, and they say, well, we heard this kid talking about suicide. And that's how it happens. It could be kids talking at school. Is it the kids talking to each other? One kid goes to a teacher and then they call law enforcement. I think it's great things to look at.
Because I know personally someone whose child had a plan. They contacted the pediatrician. The pediatrician set them up with a psychiatrist. The child never got committed. So I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, how does one go one direction and then one go completely another direction, to where you have some stranger involved? And
Like, what severity, kind of?
Right.
Like, how severe does it have to be in order to, like, get involved?
I don't think there's a standard. I think, and that's what's kind of concerning now that we're talking about it, is, I do know at some school, like in our county 2 years ago, it was a very, very sensitive topic, because there was an epidemic of teen suicides. So I think anytime, in the abundance of caution, anytime anyone heard someone expressing that, they would contact, either a school, or they would call, the sheriff's department or whatever it was. And I'd be curious to see if there is a codified way that, other places do it. But I think it's just that if just a simple concern, especially someone at a school or a doctor or anybody could call the police and say, I think this kid's talking about suicide. Law enforcement will come and investigate, and that's when they make the determination to do the compulsory commitment.
Well, what happens here is, if a child is suspected to have those ideas, then the child is brought to our emergency room, and is screened by the emergency room physician. And, from there, that physician will decide whether or not the child needs to be committed or can go home with the parents. So there's a physician in between. Law enforcement certainly does not decide anything. And that was just kind of some things I was jotting down on our Google Doc. And y'all can change, y'all can add, y'all can do whatever y'all want. I just make my notes on here instead of somewhere else so that everybody could see my thoughts. But I kind of changed our statement while she was talking to adolescents are being involuntarily committed to psychiatric facilities unnecessarily. And then as an alternative, we have law enforcement must be properly trained to assess adolescents prior to commitment. And I had also jotted down adolescents must be screened by an emergency room physician, just because I know that's how it's done here. But I don't know what other ideas y'all have as alternative.
I mean, as a worker in Louisiana, they made the right contacts through psychiatrists and went to the facility thinking they were going for an appointment to have a conversation, and they took the child and committed him right there. So, I mean, I've kind of personally known somebody who's went through the pediatrician route to the psychiatrist. Child never got committed, and that child had a plan. This other child didn't have a plan. The parents weren't even aware that they were going to commit the child when they went to this appointment. And then you're talking about if you bring them to the emergency room. So it seems like there's a lot of different ways that this can go. And I guess it's hard to distinguish which one's going to end up with the commitment,
right,
without the parent having to say so.
No, it's okay. Does anyone know a first responder that they could talk to and maybe ask, do y'all have a routine set of questions you ask people in circumstances like this? Maybe that would be a good person for us to I think
I know a bunch, so I can reach out and see if they have a protocol.
Yeah, just in case. I feel like it might be a useful resource.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and I work actually in the ER, so I see first responders every day. They bring patients in every day, but we do the same process that Chrissy was saying here in Texas about having the physician look them over first, and the physician will decide, what to do with the child. Ask them if they have a plan, ask them some other preliminary questions before deciding where they go or if they go at all.
Right, because sometimes it's just in the heat of the moment, they're angry. So once they have that time to de-escalate, it's a whole different situation. I know law enforcement here never, ever goes straight to, a psychiatric facility with a child. And of course, there's such a lack of facilities that, sometimes they'll stay in our ER for a couple of days before we can even place them.
Right. Same here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's completely different than it is in Florida, for sure.
Where are you, Chrissy?
I'm in Louisiana.
Okay. I'm in Texas, so.
I'm just kind of, here in Gainesville, we are fortunate because we have two large rehabilitation hospitals. But I'm just kind of curious if there's a difference in metropolitan areas or urban areas. And I apologize if I'm getting all into these, but this is something that I find fascinating here. The different ways and how it's so different depending on where you are.
Right. I'm in South Louisiana, way down there where Chelsea and I are going to get the tropical storm this weekend.
Yeah, not looking forward to that.
No.
Wait, where are y'all at? Because I was just talking about that. Because my parents, they're in Florida, so they were saying, well, Louisiana's going to get it bad.
Yeah.
So where y'all at?
No. I'm
Yeah.
about in Golden Meadow. I'm about probably about 90 miles southwest of New Orleans.
Okay.
I'm in
yeah.
So I'm like,
Yeah, you getting it?
yeah. So I'm like two
I
and a
used
half.
to live in Mandeville.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Madisonville. Yeah, my sisters went to school there for a while, high school.
Right. Metairie, Louisiana.
Oh, right down the street. Well, I lived across the causeway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if there's a point that y'all want me to reach out to, we have a behavioral health unit at Children's Hospital. I can reach out to folks there as well.
Yes.
I have a psychiatrist contact. I can talk to her. That's not affiliated with Children's. She's independent. So, I mean, if there's things we want in any aspect, I mean, I don't mind doing anything either.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thankfully, as a result of this, I got to have a couple meetings with the new incoming director of the pediatric psychiatry department at UF Health. He's been a big help. So any questions or anything like that you guys want me to ask him, I can reach out to him at any time.
Okay.
And actually, he was very helpful in educating me about the whole process. So that was, it's pretty amazing how complicated and convoluted this whole system is. It's very disheartening sometimes.
So where do we want to? Do we want to kind of regroup our thoughts? Maybe by Saturday, can kind of just write whatever you want on the document, and we can go.
Yeah, I
from
think that's a good idea. And then maybe like tomorrow, like I'm gonna be working on some stuff tomorrow for sure after I finish this assignment for tonight, and we can kind of drop things in the group before we like put them on a document. I guess just everyone who can pay attention, and we can go on email because I know Sharif's time is different than ours, just to keep him involved. Like just kind of say or we can just keep it in the email so that he can see it, so we won't have to double it or whatever. So
Yeah, just
you know,
since
Could
I'm
we use the could we use the document that Christy made for this week as like a notes document, and then maybe the one that I don't know, I haven't looked at it, I'm sorry, but the one that we want to submit, like do a different one, that way it's, so we have room for all of us to put our thoughts, and then another one for all of us to do like the finalized version.
I mean that works if someone wants to create another one or.
Oh, just since I don't, I have a Japanese cell phone number, and as y'all know, it's Friday morning here. I just can't see the GroupMe stuff, so all I have access to is the Google Docs.
we can use Google Docs to make all our notes and things, and we can email if we want to talk amongst the group.
Sure, that's fine. Just if something had, just let me know what you want me to be responsible for, since I'm the outsider there. I'm not in the States, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we can just keep going down the list if y'all want putting different options, if y'all think of different things, and then we can decide on the top two.
So you want us to kind of just go in and put like our like alternative, and then we'll kind of figure it out.
Sure.
So I think I'm totally confused on the assignment. Again, I'm reading way too far into the topic. So are we supposed to, are we supposed to be choosing, like our alternative is the alternative that we think should be going on right now, and then our second one is like a related policy but different? I mean, I don't understand, like, I guess what she's wanting us to do.
I want us to focus just on one, and that might not be a good solution in the end when we start looking. I think she wants to have like two different options of how we can fix this problem.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of how I understood it too. Like, just in case we get deep into it and then we realize, like, oh, this actually isn't going to work for whatever reason, we have another one to fall back on, I guess.
Okay. I make everything way harder than it should be, so.
No, I want you to. Is it?
So don't worry.
Here's my only issue. Like, I literally, after these meetings, I just do the stuff now to be done with it, to move on. Do we have a consensus of 2 to just make this, like, because we're making this way too hard. Like, when she was on with us, it sounded super easy, and now I'm lost again.
Right.
I
But
mean,
with
it's like,
her,
it's too many, it's like too much, like, non-effective of what's, I have no idea, again, like kind of what Jordan said. Like, we said 2 things, and she actually pointed us to what we should be doing. And now it's like everyone's going to get off and look for something else, and then we pick 2.
No, I think
That just gives everyone the opportunity to kind of like to involve themselves, you know. I agree with what you're saying, but
the phone call with her, we were mostly working on correcting our
Problem statement.
initial
Right.
statement. So that was just we going all the way back to week 1 at this point. So we kind of changed it to saying, you know, or we have ideas to change it on the document. But then our assignment for this week is to come up with 2 ways to fix that problem.
So, like, right now, okay, so I guess it's Chrissy that had written it. She wrote alternative number 1, all adolescents must be screened by an emergency room physician prior to being committed. So then it says description, she put description of alternative number 1. So, like, I'm assuming we would all go in and put, like, I guess, like, a suggestion as to how to make sure that can be followed through with, right? Like, is that kind of what y'all are thinking we should do?
Well, I mean, it depends on if y'all have other ideas of how to fix the solution besides having a physician do the screening and are training law enforcement to do the screening. You know, do y'all have a different solution to our original problem that we can replace one of these with?
I guess the only thing out of what we talked about today is that if we have a certain guardrail or boundary of steps that have to happen, like how we're leaning towards you have to be evaluated by an ER physician, is there other steps that have to be checked off before we get to A, B, and C, or B, C, and D points or whatever? I mean, is that part of it?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what she'd want in our description, you know, a brief of how we would change that process. That's kind of what I understood.
So I'm just
That's what I was thinking.
reading the assignment description, and it literally just says a minimum of 3 paragraphs. 1 paragraph for the status quo, 1 for alternative, and 1 for the second alternative. So
Right.
I don't think we need to get like super caught up in needing to have all our ducks in a row and have all the information. She literally just wants a brief description of each one. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah.
So we don't have to have it all planned out right now. Just like a brief description of what we have in mind. Pretty simple. Trying not to get too caught up in the details.
Okay, so how do we want to go about that? Are we all going to write a couple sentences and merge it? Like, how do we?
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe if we all just put our thoughts and then we can kind of put it together.
Okay.
Scott, do you think you can focus on doing the status quo paragraph and maybe the rest of us do more of the alternatives? Just because you know what
Yeah,
the
okay. Yeah, that I can do that. I'll do a quick little research and see. I know what happens in my county, but I'll go ahead and take a look at some of the other ones in statewide, and we'll put that. And I'll do the status quo, and I will get. Let's see. You want this done by Saturday, so that gives everybody plenty of time to add any kind of alternatives.
That sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. I'll get this up Saturday.
Cyrus can't hear us.
Did he? Oh, there he is.
Okay, and I'll talk to some paramedics and kind of see what their process is to see if maybe we would be able to, I guess, like suggest to train law enforcement in the same type of manner, like somehow like have some type of, like figure out how we can train them to be able to do that. So I'll talk to them if y'all want me to do that and see like if we can figure out the law enforcement section.
That works.
Okay, so basically we're gonna have everybody's thoughts in here by Saturday. Y'all want to try for that?
Yes,
I can do
that's
that.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after we do, do we have a point person who's going to merge to submit it? That's all I ever worry about. We all put in the input. It's just, I'm at this point, honestly, I'm good with the consensus on everything. So as long as we just just tell me what to do.
Yeah, y'all can always send me the audio.
I'll send you the audio. I have it recorded now. I always do that every week. But as far as the written part, who's going to submit the one for this week?
I don't mind submitting it.
I think that was Jordan.
I'm sorry, I kind of jumped the gun last week, but
That's fine.
Yeah, I don't want to commit to it this week because we may not have internet.
I'll do it. I'll do it for sure. Sorry, y'all can't see me anymore.
Jordan,
But yes,
Jordan.
I'll do it.
Let me know. I can always submit it too whenever I do the audio. If something happens.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, so I'll submit the audio as usual to the group email, and then Chelsea, you'll upload it to YouTube and send it in?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I guess Cyrus, he lost communication. We'll have to email him or something. What happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. Am I the only one in the group that hasn't done the group discussion that's due for tonight?
No,
Absolutely not.
I'm working on it right now.
Because I totally misread it, and y'all this week has been, oh dear God.
Oh, I feel you. Same for me.
I read the first article. I got to read the second.
Yep. I honestly think doing this MHA has been the worst thing for me, because now every day at work I see just how jacked up everything is that I have to work with. It's like, oh my God.
Hey, y'all, did it take y'all long to read everything?
Yeah.
I'm almost done with the first article.
No, Chelsea, go read what we have to